Very welcome back to OTB AM. It is 7:55 on Wednesday. It is Wednesday. Yes, it is Wednesday, the 22nd of April. Thanks very much for that. If you want to get involved in the conversation this morning, 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Of course, you can always use the hashtag OTBAM. Owen, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, Ger. What's the crack?
Bit of intramural shade being thrown there by Paul Rouse in our last piece. Calling into question the prowess of the Latin scholars. It did strike me while I was listening to that if I'd had Paul Rouse as a history teacher at some point along the way, I've no doubt that I would have been more interested in history. Is there any way we could appoint him like the nation's history teacher?
Well, the issue there is that everybody would then become history teachers, and we would have an overload in the history economy in Ireland, and nobody would want to do any other job. We would have an under-resourced economy in every other department because everybody would want to be a history teacher. We would have 5.5 million wannabe history teachers, I think, if Paul Rouse was the nation's history teacher. Well,
you obviously love football, but there's no sign of you becoming a coach, Owen. So it doesn't automatically follow. You'd just be wiser in your day job. You would know, for example, that Tyrone were the team for the first decade.
That's just a weird tangent. I don't know. Maybe we all secretly want to be football coaches and we just can't. And that's my point. Maybe we would all want to be history teachers, but just can't because people like Paul Rouse are going to be too good for us to get it. Okay. What was the exact shade he was throwing there? I didn't catch the full piece.
He was saying that Latin scholars professors of Latin aren't always known for their sporting prowess.
It's harsh.
Anyway, let's move on because there's lots to get to. We're going to read you the sports news. We're going to tell you what's coming up in a moment. We've got to talk about the big breaking news overnight, obviously, Owen. It's not the fact that the country won't have any sports until September of any meaningful certainly in terms of contact. But it's that Rob Gronkowski is out of retirement. He has quit the WWE and he is back playing football if there is football again. Maybe this is a publicity stunt for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe there's not going to be any football. Who knows?
Yeah, I would be surprised if Tom Brady was in the business of doing publicity stunts that don't actually benefit his football team, because this is clearly a Tom Brady move, isn't it? He's picked up the phone to him and say, well, he's not coming out of retirement, first of all. He is switching codes from champion wrestler, let's not forget, he won a title there a couple of weeks ago, to potential Super Bowl winner again. That's what Rob Gronkowski has done. The WWE, the big losers this morning. I'm surprised actually that Patriots got something for him. I was like, I didn't realize that's how it worked. I thought that retirement meant that you were no longer an asset to your previous team, but obviously he had a couple of years left on his contract.
Yeah, 2 years left. So last year, which he didn't play and didn't get paid for, and then this year, which obviously they had to release him essentially because he said he wanted to go, and they got a reasonable amount for him. A fourth round pick is not nothing. Some good players emerge in the fourth round, but so the draft is today's Wednesday, tomorrow's Thursday. The draft is tomorrow night. This is like one of the sports that seems to be quite happy to progress with no real sense that no, everything's fine, it's all going to be grand. We're going to start our games in late August, early September, and Super Bowl's going to go ahead next year in Tampa, and we expect full stadiums the whole way along.
Yeah, obviously the drafts will be done virtually, and I don't know, you'd have to think that there's going to be a little bit of skullduggery done between now and the first pick of the draft if it hasn't already been done. Like, if you're operating in $1 billion industry like the NFL is, have you already broken protocol to secretly meet a potential pick to see? Don't they have to give him a quick physical, just see he's in the shape that he says he is, for example, when you want to pick, especially a high round pick in the draft? I'd be surprised if things aren't being flouted already. It's too expensive and too rich to not be to not have people bending the rules in some way. As regards to the season, who knows? Donald Trump obviously needs to watch his television, and he needs to watch his America's Game and all that sort of thing. So if he's got anything to do with it, there probably will be an NFL start date that resembles previous years.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying, essentially, is what you're saying, right?
Basically, yeah. I'm sure there are plenty of secret GMs in PPE driving around the country talking to kids that might be prospective draft picks. But of course, they're only going to the grocery store to pick up essential items.
Yeah, they don't have the 2K radius thing, but if they did, it would be like, oh, my GPS got lost there on the way to the store for whatever it is that they buy in the store in those brown paper bags. 8 o'clock this morning, the FAI said they need to speak with the HSE to gain clarification regarding mass gatherings. Events involving more than 5,000 people have been banned until at least August 31st. The FAI said they need to host international games in September. and they've been told by UEFA that the Nations League is due to start. The interim CEO, Gary Owens, also feels the 5,000 limit could provide a glimmer of hope for the League of Ireland. The proposed takeover of Newcastle has a new objector. Qatari broadcaster beIN Sports has written to the Premier League and its 20 clubs asking them to block the sale to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince. Amnesty International have also written to the Premier League highlighting Saudi Arabia's poor human rights record. But beIN is almost 1 year into a 3-year deal worth €566 million to England's top-flight clubs, and they are locked in a bitter diplomatic dispute in which beIN are basing their objection. But they're also saying that Saudi Arabia is the source of a lot of piracy. So if you are watching an illegal stream of a Premier League game, beIN Sports are saying that there's piracy going on, and that some of that piracy would be the ones that you're watching. The season's Eredivisie is over. Football in the Netherlands has been banned until September the 1st as a result of the pandemic. The Dutch Football Association, the KNVB, will meet with clubs to discuss the ramifications of their decision to end the season. When play was suspended, Ajax topped the table on goal difference from AZ Alkmaar. That'd be a very big club thing to happen, going into a battle slightly ahead on goal difference, and you win the season, as opposed to it being split or shared. Could they do that? Would a shared championship be a thing? Could it?
I think it definitely lessens the significance of it, doesn't it? Shared anything in sport is probably not how something wants to go. I would say a lot of people would just rather something is called off and no winner is decided, rather than to have to share a trophy with somebody.
They share the ashes, don't they? Do they, or do you retain the ashes? Do you retain? It's the same as the Ryder Cup, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I certainly have heard the word retention used around the ashes. But anyway, that's the ashes. Like this is the different stuff. Like I mean, like we're even retaining the idea of that has a sense of pride around it. Sharing, it just doesn't work. It just does not work. There's no point playing it in the first place if you're going to end up sharing a competition with somebody that you might win if you don't win, sort of thing. That just kills the whole purpose of sport.
You're channeling your inner Michael Jordan there. In racing, organisers hope this year's Galway Festival can happen behind closed doors. They announced that it wouldn't happen, obviously, in the aftermath of the mass gatherings ban, that it wouldn't get underway as normal, but they do hope that there is some possibility that the races themselves might take place. And the Galway Race Committee say the meeting would not have been possible with fans present. In American football, as we've already said, Rob Gronkowski is 30, turning 31, been retired since last March, but he will play alongside Tom Brady in New England, in Tampa, if any games actually happen. And it's funny, wasn't it, in Tampa where the WWE was that the part of Florida that they were having their behind closed door stuff? That
I think so.
They were the ones who were declared as essential workers in all this.
Well, is Rob Gronkowski in Florida not a terrible mix? Isn't that like the place where people tend to go on spring break and really enjoy themselves in the United States? I'm not like, New England seems suitably boring for somebody like Rob Gronkowski, and to be able to control his talents. I'm sure when you've got Tom Brady there as your quarterback, he's probably going to keep him in line, and that's the reason why he's coming back. But I'd say Florida will provide a fair few distractions for him, and it could be an interesting season.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I hope that there's a Keeping Up with the Kardashians-style reality TV show that I would happily... They should start it now, because I would happily pay my $9.99 a month or whatever it costs. 4 minutes past 8, here's what's coming up on the show this morning. I'm going to get into the newspapers for you in just a second. The main feature that we're doing today, obviously, is the Mount Rushmore for the county of Limerick. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes' time. I think it's fairly straightforward. It's going to be some modern people, some old people, and then some historic people. That's like... I mean, I know that they think they're a county of great sporting prowess, but are they? Have they enough people to keep this going for? We've got a full half an hour scheduled for it, and surely they're not going to take up. Are we going to take the full half hour?
I will. I'll let the people of Limerick respond to that. I genuinely thought that. Yeah, it's like, well, okay. So let's. If you want to break it down per capita, it does it provide the same kick that say Cork has brought us? No, but Cork's probably going to say that it's the greatest of all time, sort of thing. But no, it's got a good spread. I still think though that you've got a couple of definites. And then outside, I think you've got two definites really when it comes to this Mount Rushmore, and it just depends where Jack Anderson is leaning, which way Neil Tracy is leaning to kind of pick up the rest. Like, Neil's a big rugby man. I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 rugby heads.
4 rugby heads, I'd say.
4 rugby heads.
I wouldn't be surprised. Or 1 rugby head done 4 times. Later on after that, we have Kenny Cunningham inducting something into our Off the Ball Culture Hall of Fame. British comedy came in for a bit of a kicking last week, essentially from yourself and Stephanie Preisner.
Although, you're just happy enough to just have somebody on the piece who's actually, or somebody that you know better to actually throw out the blame. It was obviously Stephanie who did most of the blame, but it's okay. You can point a finger at me if you want, and we can get into that later.
There's definitely a strand of British comedy that's rubbish, that is vastly overrated, and we'll talk.
Also, you're saying
we'll talk a bit about some of them today. Is Gavin and Stacey not shite? I mean, is that not? No. Emma's saying no. Do you think it's good?
I don't know. I've seen bits and pieces of it. I saw the episode of Christmas. It's grand. It's fine. Like, some people find James Corden hilarious. Like the fact that I think British comedy is funny, but it's not hilarious. I think that is usually the going rate. There's just so much of it, and so much of the stuff that looks the same when you turn on Gold on a Sunday afternoon. Kenny Cunningham, however, will disagree vehemently with that.
Every week we're going to do a piece on how the business of sport is dealing with what's going on at the crisis at the moment. And Jill Downey, of course, sponsorship, and Mick O'Keefe of Teneo are going to join us around about 9:40 this morning to talk to us about how the industry is responding and what trends are beginning to emerge. And we'll keep this going over the next while, just as a means to let everybody understand a little bit about the plates that are shifting in the background and the pressures that the sports organisations are going to come under from their sponsors and from their broadcast partners to try and get something up that resembles a product that we all used to know. And that's obviously the main thrust of the newspapers, which we'll get into now.
OTB AM.
Right, offtheball.com is shootings and stabbings were around every month. This is Aidan O'Brien speaking to Joe last night on the football show, talking about making it around Millwall. And then championship hopes dwindle as mass gatherings banned until autumn. That was the news, obviously, that broke yesterday afternoon around about 4:45. Accrington player banned for 8 games after calling Paul McShane a racial slur. Rob Gronkowski out of retirement to join Tom Brady in Tampa is a story we've just spoken about. And Paul Rouse debunking the William Webb Ellis myth. Again, this is the whole. It was just an ad campaign, I think. As far as I remember, it was Visa around the time of a World Cup, who certainly helped to propagate the myth that William Webb Ellis picked up the ball, ran with it at rugby, and the sport was invented. It's a brilliant creation myth and not true, apparently. So that's offtheball.com for you this morning.
The Irish Independent this morning leads with Dr. Sam McConkey's comments around contact sport being a long way off. Warren's leading expert is the headline there. And Isa Nasewa says, I'd love to go back to Dublin and coach Leinster. So this is former captain Isa Nasewa admitting that, of course, he'd relish the chance to go back. Just to get into some of the quotes, it's Cian Tracy's piece here this morning. He says that, would I like to coach Leinster one day? Absolutely. I would love to. When that time will be, I just don't know. But it's not the last time we will be in Dublin, that's for sure. I'll never say never. We love Dublin. We love Ireland. We love Leinster. And the main picture there on the back page of the Irish Independent this morning is Nissen Christensen, Red Bull Salzburg, Danish defender, wearing a protective mask as his side returned to training in Austria yesterday.
I don't think there is a player in Leinster's history that is as much of a cult hero as Isa Nasewa. Obviously, Rocky Elson completely won the hearts of everybody with his sensational play over the course of 1 year. And I don't know, have we done a Classic Game Club where we've looked back at the Champions Cup final that Leinster would make the breakthrough? We could do that entire season and just do the performances of Rocky Elson as the entire Classic Game Club, because he's man of the match, quarter-final, semi-final, final. And anyway, he just looks like a big kid playing football with a bunch of 5-year-olds, because he's that different against the Leicester pack that was the backbone of the England team that won the World Cup. And so obviously high watermark for Isa to come in and over a period of time take. But certainly the best. And reading that this morning as a Leinster supporter, you're like, wow, that'd be amazing. That'd be great. Even if he was just around the place. And I don't know if there's many people in any other, I don't know. I don't know that many people who have that kind of impact.
Yeah, I'm not sure. He's obviously gone back home, has he? And he's not.
He's in New Zealand
at the moment.
Yeah, no, he's not. Yeah. He's not coaching it.
It'd be interesting to see if they actually manage to create something for him. Given it's a fairly stacked coaching staff at the moment, it would be something that Leinster fans would obviously love. He's a hero, and I think really it is Rocky or Nasewa as definitely the they're beyond cult heroes at this point within Leinster fans. But I think within Irish rugby, perhaps they're cult heroes. Like you have people naming their kids Rocky and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, like sorry, cult. It's not a cult. It's kind of like I imagine it's how you would feel about Maurice Fitz when you heard Maurice Fitz was involved with the senior inter-county team. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, amazing. Like it's you want to see those people back involved, and if they manage to bring success, it just feels sweeter. It's almost like an extension of the squad. You're like, I'm really happy for the bunch of players and also for that particular coach who is obviously a legend.
There's a warm and fuzziness about it. The Irish Times this morning, they've got mass gatherings are who we are, losing them feels surreal. It's Malachy Clerkin's thought piece. Obviously written quite quickly on deadline last night, and it's a great piece this morning. FAI to seek clarification on mass gatherings from government. And then there's a picture of Kevin Cassidy being shouted at by Jim McGuinness. Now, this is the time when they're obviously still mates and things are still going okay for them. Former Donegal chairman breaks silence on McGuinness and Cassidy rift. I don't know where he's been speaking.
He's been speaking, I think it's just the Irish Times actually carrying that piece this morning. I'm not sure, you might be able to correct me there. I read it on the Irish Times website this morning, and basically the former Donegal chairman speaking for the first time about this said he organised a meeting between Kevin Cassidy and Jim McGuinness after their fallout. They met for 2 hours, and by all accounts, the meeting seemed fairly productive. Jim McGuinness came away happy from it. Kevin Cassidy says he came away happy from it. It was all very well-mannered, according to this piece. And Kevin Cassidy said he would make his decision about whether or not to come back, and he declined the invitation to come back into the squad.
Right. At its height, it was the Donegal GAA version of Saipan, which is about... It's pretty accurate. Although you'd say McGuinness was better at managing than Mick McCarthy was in their respective fields. And Cassidy not quite at Roy Keane's level, but like super important to that team. His point against Kildare was kind of the high watermark of his... it kind of distilled his entire career down to this. So the game is over. It's at the end. Everybody's exhausted. It's a shattering physical exertion that they put the team through. And he's got the brains, the skill and the balls to go for a far-out point to win a match in extra time. And like, wow, this guy, he's got something about him. Yeah, that is the Irish Times this morning. Examiner next.
The Irish Examiner leads with clarity sought over plan to limit crowds to 5,000 people. So this is kind of the next step. Will there be, like, this is on kind of two different levels. You've got the FAI talking about their potential League of Ireland season and also upcoming Nations League / European qualifiers. And then you have the GAA grounds as well about whether or not they'll be able to play games in sub 5,000 capacity arenas, or whether or not they'll just have to start planning for behind closed doors, because you wonder if this is going to be a stepping stone. What was announced yesterday, you can kind of see why they needed to get ahead of things, just to stop the likes of Electric Picnic happening and giving them a few months to prepare, stopping things like the All-Ireland football semi-finals and hurling semi-finals happening within the next couple of months, and to ensure that those things, there's no notions of those. I don't think anybody reasonably believed that we would have packed stadiums for All-Ireland semi-finals before the end of August, or finals really, because they would have been moved forward. But I think just yesterday kind of puts a pin in any sort of fanciful notion that we would. So the question is now, will it be safe to play under 5,000 people stadiums, in under 5,000 seater stadiums? And then also the deadline of September, does that get pushed back and back and back? You suspect both things will happen, that the number of 5,000 will get lower and the date will get pushed back as well. Players would play if deemed safe as well, says O'Donoghue. That's the other story here in the Irish Examiner. That's Will O'Donoghue of Limerick saying that if they were given the assurances, they would play. FAI warned the devil is in the detail, writes Liam Mackey. And Michael Moynihan is asking, is the government slowly preparing people to do without sport?
Yeah. I don't know. We'll get to Sam McConkey's piece. And we'll talk about all the implications of this at the end when we take you through the rest of the paper headlines. Block Saudi's Newcastle bid, says TV giant. This is the Times of London. Martin Ziegler has this, and it is an exclusive. Yusuf Al-Obaidi, the chief executive of the BN Media Group, says in the letters, the danger of allowing the acquisition of a controlling or material interest, whether acquired directly or indirectly, in a major Premier League club by what is effectively the Saudi Arabian government cannot be ignored, given the country's past and continuing illegal actions and their direct impact on the commercial interests of the Premier League. So BN Sport maintains that there is a pirate channel in Saudi Arabia which is broadcasting games illegally in Saudi Arabia. And obviously, beIN Sport pay hundreds of millions every year for the rights to broadcast these games and essentially to make money off the back of them, and they're not being allowed to do so. So maybe there's a way here for the Premier League to say, ooh, we'd really like the cut of your gym. We'd love to give you one of our clubs, but unfortunately we can't because you're in dispute with one of our broadcast holders. Obviously, Amnesty International writing to them and saying the Saudi government should have nothing to do with the Premier League team doesn't seem to have had any impact with the Premier League at the moment. So it will be interesting to see if this has, this is going to hit you in your pocket, or else Saudi Arabia and government just decide to pay for those rights themselves.
Yeah, it could happen. Probably have a few pennies. Irish Daily Star this morning leads with no season in the sun. Westlife cash lost another blow to GAA. Prospects of a 2020 championship look bleak. Tottenham Hotspur are going to come back as the fittest club in the Premier League, no question. Spurs pair run into flack. You've got Serge Aurier and Moussa Sissoko training together yesterday. Posted on Instagram, which obviously not the smartest decision in the world. Pochettino is the headline here, which has been doing a story which has been doing the rounds quite a bit this morning, that Mauricio Pochettino could be in line to be targeted by Newcastle United as their next manager. And FAI seek clarity on comeback. FAI CEO Gary Owens last night expressed hope that the League of Ireland might resume ahead of the autumn, but added that he wanted clarification from the government regarding international matches. So obviously yesterday's announcement would be that there will be a ban on mass gatherings of over 5,000 people until the end of August. That was aimed at non-sporting events such as concerts as well as sporting events. But FAI officials are eager for talks on how the international team, which is set to return to action in September, will be affected.
Back page of the Daily Mail this morning is clubs cast off, provincial games cancelled in GAA fixtures reshuffle. So this is Michael Clifford and Shane McGrath, the story. The Provincial and All-Ireland Club Championship will not take place this season. Haven't seen this anywhere else. GAA bosses advised County Board yesterday that planning for the Provincial Club Championship was not part of their contingency plans in the event of restrictions being lifted to allow club activity resume. But the prospect of the Inter-County Championships being played in 2020 have receded significantly too after the news yesterday that 5,000 people will be banned from gathering until August at least. Does having no provincial and national club championship, if there are club games and everybody wins a county championship and there's county championships, it would be really disappointing if you were the county champions this year and you didn't get the chance to go forward. But ultimately, everybody's going to have to make some accommodation here. If there was any possibility of playing club championships, I think that'd be great, right? People would be happy enough.
Definitely, yeah. Just anything really, if there was a safe way to get that back on the pitch, people would take it. I guess does that story preclude it from potentially finishing back in its old date in a couple of months into the following year? I think it's just talking about the within a calendar year sort of situation. So who knows what might be able to kick down the line as well. The Mirror this morning, the Irish Mirror leads with Ozils in isolation. Pay cut rebel Mesut left out on his own as Gunners aim to persuade two other stars to slash wages. So this is, I haven't seen the names of the other two players at Arsenal who have declined to take their 12.5% pay cut, but Mesut Ozil is certainly one of them. Pochettino, same headline. Newcastle owners want Maurizio going. Galway races is off limits. Going. Irish clash finished, asks the Mirror, and gone. A GAA season in real peril. The Galway races will go ahead behind closed doors. Whether or not the GAA will remains to be seen. Football, you would have thought, would be the most likely sporting event to go ahead behind closed doors over the next couple of months.
The Telegraph for you this morning: Spurs face new shame after a pair's video post. Not the smartest group of footballers, it turns out, at Spurs. Doing things and then catching yourself. Arsenal players pressurised into agreeing pay reductions. It's funny how Spurs are out running and doing that stupid thing, and the Arsenal players are still the only ones that I can see coming under any pressure for pay cuts. Has everybody else taken pay cuts? Is that why it's not an issue? I don't understand why. It was just Arsenal really bad at managing publicity.
I think the Arsenal situation was as much to do with performance as it was to do with COVID-19. Their pay cuts were regards to whether or not they finish in the Champions League. So you would take your 12.5% pay cut, but you would have a restoration if they were, say, to qualify for the Champions League. And even if the season doesn't resume, there were some talks this morning that Arsenal may qualify for the Champions League in a completely different way. That there's talks of a UEFA coefficient being used for next year's Champions League qualification if seasons are scrapped, which is obviously ridiculous. If you're going to have to use something that if the season is called off, surely you use current Premier League standings rather than your actual UEFA coefficients.
I mean, that would seem to make sense. There was at least some competition involved in the last 12 months for that. But okay, next.
The Guardian this morning leads with Mo Farah's tribute to Neil Black, the former UK athletics chief, died suddenly yesterday. So heartbroken Farah leads tributes after mentor's death. And Spurs players sorry for ignoring coronavirus guidelines is the headline on that one. A couple of other things from The Guardian. Amnesty says Premier League risks becoming a patsy, and why Trump's grand plan for golf is way off target, writes Andy Bull.
The back page of the Herald. First contact, we're a long way off return for team sport, warns virus experts. So this is Professor Sam McConkey, who has been speaking with Conor McKeown, and they've got a good Q&A in where they just outline exactly what is likely to happen. So it's literally question, answer. It's worth getting your hands on today, if you can, where he's asked about what the conditions, the prevalent conditions would need to be for sport to return in the way that we are used to having seen it in the past. It needs a vaccine, it needs PEP or PrEP. So he's talking about how the suppression of HIV has happened, which is PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, and PEP, which is post-exposure prophylaxis. So essentially these are antiviral drugs that you take either before or after exposure to the virus. And unless we have that for COVID-19, or unless we have an elimination strategy like they've had in New Zealand, where he actually predicts that there will be rugby in New Zealand as early as August, which would be great because then we can all watch rugby in New Zealand, get up early. Maybe they'll put it on a little bit later for the rest of the world too and increase the audiences globally. But we're all going to get significantly into how the Crusaders are going against your boys, the Wellington, whatever they're called, Owen.
Oh, I am on the Wellington, whatever they're called, and I've always been a fan, and Wellington, whatever they're called, till I die.
So look, this is essentially saying that it would be very unlikely that we'll have contact sport again for the foreseeable future. He's very, very positive about running, very positive about cycling, very positive about golf to a certain extent, and singles tennis, single person sailing as well. So, you know, I mean, we're good at single person sailing. We could all watch a lot of that this summer. Good vantage points up in the mountains. We're an island nation. Mm-hmm. It's always been our calling to eat more fish. Don't know why we didn't eat more fish throughout history, and to sail boats.
Like, are you suggesting that all people who sail for Ireland are automatically pescatarians or something like them? I'm sure that they eat other things. Like, absolutely, it's something that could happen. Like, the golf is one of the things that, while it's easy to point at what, say, the PGA Tour has done in terms of its public utterances over the last couple of weeks, it's easy to point a finger at them and say that's disgraceful. And clearly, they are nowhere near the top of the priority list if there is any shortages of COVID test kits. And of course, there is a whole Donald Trump element to it. But a sport like golf does make sense as one of the first things that might come back because of the nature of the game, because you can practice safe social distancing. And really, let's face it, Ger, like, I mean, the players aren't going to complain that much. Like, people will say, oh, well, you imagine Tiger on the last day of Augusta last year without the fans. Like, of course, it's a different thing, 100%. But as a television spectacle, is it like, does it change that much as opposed to, say, the big cheer after, say, a goal is scored, for example, if you're watching football on television? I certainly feel it's much more jarring watching those behind closed doors football games as opposed to, say, turning on the web.com tour and there's nobody watching the golfers. And even on some of the European tour events where there's nobody watching, it actually doesn't seem that strange. So I think it ticks all the boxes, really, as something that could come back. Sailing is something that you mentioned there as well. Like, a lot of individual sports are very, very possible. Like athletics and cycling, though, is kind of a different ballgame because people run in bunches and it's very, very hard to stay distant. But the likes of golf and those on the sea sports, definitely you could see coming back. And then when it comes to the geography, like obviously New Zealand's they've done a fantastic job in how they've reacted to this. They are helped though by their geographical location, and as a result, you're right, we're going to see them back quickly. I'm trying to look through the football teams as well to try and get on the bandwagon of someone. I don't know, maybe Auckland City till I die, perhaps, in the football league.
Oh right, for their soccer teams.
Yeah, I think semi-professional club based in Sandringham in Auckland. They currently compete in the ISPS and the Premiership, the highest level of domestic football in New Zealand. So I just picked one. They've actually got a good international field to their squad. They've got 3 Spaniards. They've got an Egyptian footballer playing for them, a Croatian. Mario Bilan is his name, and their captain Angel Berlanga is playing for them. I'm trying to see if there's
Related
any.
to the Wexford Belans and the Dublin Belans.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Tall Croatians, the Belans quite tall as well. So, to to go back to this though, like it is devastating that they're very unlikely until some major breakthrough happens. And look, again, we continue to make this point. Luke O'Neill was quite positive last week about how the entire weight of the world scientific community are working on these scenarios at the moment. So that would give you some hope, but at the same time, the brutality of the announcement yesterday saying, right, that's it for mass gatherings under 5,000, so over 5,000, has certainly left a bit of a pall of depression over the country this morning.
Yeah, I think that there are so many people who just their life and certainly their weekends revolve around sport, and if it's not sport, and gigs, sporting gigs, like sport and music are two of the most important things in this country in terms of recreation. There's no getting away from that. And when I mean recreation, I don't necessarily mean going out and playing. Thankfully, there's a huge portion of people who do that, but there is also a huge portion of people who just gain their recreation from going to gigs and from going to games. And those two things have certainly had a pin put in them. Like even just speaking from music's perspective, that is one thing that is probably the very, very, very last thing to come back, because you can't put those behind closed doors. If you put them in certain arenas with safe social distancing, the arena won't be able to make enough money because there won't be enough people through the door to actually pay the band and all that sort of stuff. So that is the very, very last thing to come back. At least with sport, we have some sort of semblance of being able to watch this thing on television that isn't a million miles away from how you would ordinarily consume it.
Yeah, you do wonder if there is some way of getting some number of people to venues. If bigger venues now have a slimmed down restriction, so say a venue like Vicar Street, for example, has about 1,200 capacity. If you were to put 300 in there, I know you're talking about the profitability or being able to turn the lights on. I don't know. Is there a way that you can have 300 people spaced? Is there any point to that? I mean, there might be for a comedy gig, but for a music gig,
yeah,
where it's actually the whole point is that you're going with the intention of, feeling the energy of the crowd as much as the energy of the band, and the energy that the band gets off the crowd being energized by the fact that they're like it's a perfect virtuous circle when it actually works as an entertainment or a cultural moment. And to strip that away and have kind of, yay, I'm self-consciously cheering here as like I'm 2 meters away from everybody around me.
Well, it's interesting. For comedy, you could definitely do it. But I wonder, is there a sort of comparable situation where people who have like tickets to gigs would be saying right now, no, I don't want to go to a 1/3 full Vicar Street because, as you say, it's not going to be the same energy. It's kind of the same as when we listen to footballers say we don't want to play in front of empty stadiums. And we kind of sometimes tend to scoff at that, saying, well, it's not up to you. It's actually kind of important, and I'd imagine that sort of energy that you get from going to a gig is a fraction of, but still similar to what sports people get in terms of playing in front of full stadiums. It's an entirely different ball game.
I don't know. Last point on this, though, it's getting to that point where Davy Fitz said, if it's this or nothing, what do you do?
100, that's the question, and we all know the answer to it. We all want it back, and it will do good things for people watching it. And even if they just want to say now safely, we want to wait till after the sub 5,000 gatherings or the 5,000 plus gatherings is restricted, even if they want to just kick things back to beyond the end of August, I don't think people will have as much of an issue with that, as long as there's a bit of definition around it. And I say a bit because who knows if this gets kicked back again and the deadline gets extended. But yeah, Davy's right. If it's between those two things, you're always going to take the empty stadium instead of nothing at this point. All
right, 8:29 this morning. Over the next while here on Off the Ball, we're going to be checking in with athletes from around the country and asking them how's the head. We're hearing how they're coping during this crisis, what they're doing to keep their mental health in order, and to find out what advice they found useful from their sporting careers that served them well during this stressful time. We'd love to hear as well how you're getting on. You can WhatsApp us 087 9180 180. What's keeping you sane? What's got you through the last few weeks? And how are you going to get through the next few weeks as well? You can use the hashtag How's the Head as well. So yesterday afternoon, Will O'Callaghan caught up with Deirdre Duke, World Cup silver medalist with the Irish hockey team.